People are widely reported paranormal phenomena whose origins range from demons, sleep paralysis, and even aliens. First off, I'd like to split the term shadow people into three different categories, because from the research I've conducted, there seems to be three different types of this entity. The first of which is very spirit-like in nature and often associated with haunted buildings and ghosts. They also often have a very negative feel when encountered. Second type is also very common and is often associated with things such as sleep paralysis. The third type is slightly more interesting and is often said to be some kind of extraterrestrial life or interdimensional beings. Shadow people or shadow figures have long been associated with hauntings. Often seen out of the corner of people's eyes and moving at extremely fast speeds, they are said to be the sign of quite a dark or negative entity. This phenomenon has been caught on video and still cameras many times by both paranormal investigators and unknowing members of the public. My personal belief on this type of spirit that it is actually real and they do exist. I believe I've actually encountered some of my investigations. However, it's also very easy for people to mistake this type of spirit for something that it actually isn't. A lot of them are sighted at very dark, creepy places where it's easy for your eyes to play tricks on you. They're also sighted quite often late at night when your eyes are a bit tired and possibly see things out the corner of your eyes that aren't really there. There is also the chance that people are somehow hallucinating or stretching the truth about what they've seen. So I really am sort of sitting on the fence on this one. Thank you very much for watching this short video on shadow people. I hope it's been of use to some people. Like I did mention at the start, I've come up with these categories. They're not actually
Welcome back, strangers. My name's Mr. Ramsey, and I'll be your host this evening. Have you ever witnessed a shadow figure, being, or a black mass that you couldn't quite explain? Maybe you only saw it for a few moments out the corner of your eye. You remind yourself that it was only your eye playing tricks on you again. But what if it was something more? Shadow people are alleged supernatural shadow-like humanoid figures that are often witnessed flickering on walls and ceilings, usually in the viewer's peripheral vision. A number of legends and religions describe shadow figure beings as supernatural entities and spirits of the underworld. What do you think they are? Today, we are going to be discussing the strangest shadow people encounters that subscribers have emailed to us. When I was 4 or 5, my mum and dad had a huge fight. There was something about this one that made it different. They exploded at each other and my dad left. After a few days he hadn't returned, my mum was devastated. I had never seen her like that before. I remember being so scared. My parents had money problems and were fighting almost every day. At the time, I couldn't really comprehend it. I was too young. I just knew that one of them was always stressed and about to start a fight. It was a daily routine. Neither of them could keep a decent job. The economy sucked at the time and we were living far from any of our family. They were on their own, and without my dad, it was just me and my mum. Finally, my mum couldn't take it anymore. We went to stay at her friend's house in the mountains a few hours away. She lived in this old double-wide trailer that had seen better days, but I remember being thankful that my mum had someone who was there for her. It seemed like the perfect escape for us at first. We stayed in the guest room and slept together on this old double bed, but it was hot and hard to fall asleep at night. I remember just lying there the first night trying to go to sleep when all of a sudden I noticed this human silhouette standing a few meters away from me. At first I thought it was just a strange shadow in the corner of the room, but I couldn't figure out what was causing the shadow. I ignored it and I kept trying to go to sleep, but I couldn't. I had this sense of dread come over me, like I was being watched by something in the corner of the room. I wanted to jump up and cut the lights on, but I didn't want to disturb my mum. She was finally asleep and she hadn't gotten much sleep since my dad left. So I just laid there trying to convince myself it was only a shadow on the wall. Yet no matter how hard I tried to convince myself, I knew deep down that there was nothing inside that room that would create a shadow shaped like that. Finally, I managed to fall asleep, probably from pure exhaustion. When I woke up the next morning, I told my mum about the shadow that was shaped like a strange man that appeared in the corner of the room late in the night. She laughed at what I said and told me my imagination must be getting the best of me. She sounded so confident when she told me that I believed her and nothing else unusual happened that day. However, later that night, I couldn't sleep again. The strange shadow was nowhere to be found, but it was hot and I hadn't gotten used to sleeping in the new bed. My mum had no problem sleeping, so again I just laid there trapped to my own thoughts. It's so weird that I still remember the night so vividly. I was bored but couldn't sleep, and all of a sudden I heard this noise. It sounded like someone trying to breathe or someone who was wheezing. When I opened my eyes to see what was making the noise, I saw the shadow man. This time he was closer to the bed. I couldn't make out any features of the person, but it was definitely something standing there right at my mum and me. I was so scared I tried to scream, but I was frozen in fear. I knew what was in front of me was real. It wasn't my imagination, or my mind playing tricks on me. When I finally worked up the courage to move and wake up my mum, she told me it was nothing and to go back to bed. She didn't even open her eyes. She made me feel like such a scared little kid, so I closed my eyes as tightly as I could, wishing the shadow man would go away. But I couldn't stop hearing the weird wheezing sound. It was driving me crazy. I'm pretty sure I laid there crying myself to sleep that night. The next morning, my mum spent most of the day trying to convince me I was only having nightmares. She told me it happens to a lot of people when they're staying in a new place. We had just gone through a traumatic experience with my dad walking out on us, and now we were staying in a new place. It was normal for me to be having these new nightmares that I couldn't explain. I almost believed her until later that night. There was no way I could fall asleep at a reasonable time in that creepy old double wide. There was something there. It wasn't my imagination. I managed to fall asleep sometime past midnight. but I woke up to that weird wheezing sound again. This time, it was much closer. It was loud, but I didn't open my eyes. I just kept them closed the whole night. I never fell asleep. I got up as soon as my mum started to get up at 7 the next morning. My mum woke flustered. She told me that she was going to pack up and we were going home that day. I was so glad to be leaving. When we got home, my sleep habits returned to normal and I slowly pushed away my memories of the Shadow Man. My dad came back home and life was better than ever. My mum and dad eventually split up, but they were never meant for each other. Fortunately, they are both happily married today. I learned about sleep paralysis in high school and it reminded me of those nights in the old double wide. I figured that's what had really happened to me when I saw the Shadow Man. I had never had sleep paralysis before or since, but that was a really stressful time in my life. I was in a new place and felt pretty alone, so it made sense.